Okay, it appears that we are now streaming live on YouTube. So welcome all to the meeting of the Subdivision Authority electronic meeting for Monday, October the 4th. Looking to have an approval of the agenda. I have a change to the agenda to propose for consideration. Make under item C, the new third bullet point would be hear from applicant. New number 4 would be response from administration to applicant's questions or suggestions. And then number 5, decision. So I'll look to the approving authority, or I'll move that agenda be approved as I've suggested. Looking to the 3, are those in favor and opposed? So we have an agenda. Looking to the minutes of the April 20th meeting of the Subdivision Authority, are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move they be adopted as presented. Those in favor? And they're adopted. And we'll move then into item C, which is PL 2021-0015, Gateway at Three Sisters Mountain Village subdivision, and look for administration to address the authority. Ms. Wojtenko.
Thank you. I should be running. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to give a quick presentation of subdivision application. Give me 1 second to share this. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to present this application PL 2021-0015, which is a subdivision application at the Gateway of Three Sisters, and this is also known as Site 5 under the DC 198 Three Sisters. This is the area that we're speaking of. It is 4 separate lots, as shown here. It does total 18.77 hectares. So it is quite a large site. It is located close to Three Sisters, Stewart Creek Phase 3 subdivision. And it's kind of adjacent to Three Sisters Parkway, Three Sisters Boulevard, and then the Highway 1 is located to the north. So this application process, we have been through pre-applications and now this formal subdivision application, and we deem this application complete this spring, March 26th. And under the MGA, the decision must be made within 60 days. However, we deem the application complete. So we had the materials, or most of the materials. There was still significant information required to get to a decision. So we signed an extension agreement with the applicant on 18th, 2021. And so if we don't have a decision made by this date, or we don't enter into another extension agreement, the applicant does have the right to appeal the deemed refusal to the SDAB. That's just a little bit of process background and moving forward. So the subdivision proposal put in front of us is to create 12 commercial lots, 1 medium density residential lot, and that's a block for future subdivision, 2 environmental reserve lots, 3 municipal reserves, and 2 public utility lots. It also creates 1 road. And therefore, under our subdivision bylaw, it must be decided upon by the primary subdivision authority, which is yourselves. This image just shows quickly the subdivision concept. It gives kind of an overall layout and in color of the various lots, potential building locations, the stormwater pond municipal reserve, and the residential lot. But this is just a concept map. The actual tentative plan of subdivision that has been put forward is shown here. This is a little more complex to read, just the black and white lines. But I'm going to get my highlighter going. PowerPoint. There we go. So you can see Three Sisters Boulevard here, the existing Three Sisters Parkway here. And this is the new proposed road, the 12 commercial lots, and the residential lot. So the administration recommendation coming forward today is that the application be approved, subject to numerous conditions. And you'll see later on in the conditions, we do have 42 proposed conditions. And these are conditions that address issues that we feel were not resolved satisfactorily by the applicant during our application review and subdivision process. And this allows for the recommendation for it to come forward for approval. And this provides clarity of the requirements for the applicant, and as well as provides the town with adequate protections during the detailed design and development processes. So there's a number of things that the subdivision authority is required to make or to use in making its decision under both the Municipal Government Act and the Subdivision and Development Regulation. The first one is topography. And so you can see here, this is the site. So it is a very treed site. There is some existing development on the site. Mostly this is removal of trees, as well as some stockpiling of the soils. There is a current development permit for stockpile management of these stockpiles. There's also some wetlands on the site. This is actually Alberta Transportation Lands here. And there's also some steep slopes, and I'll show you that. So this site is quite hilly. Most of the steep slopes are on the south and the north boundaries of the property, which helps guide the subdivision design. Soils is the second thing to consider, and we did get 2 geotechnical reports by McIntosh Delaney, and these were provided to you in your attachments.
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
There was a slide that just flashed by that. Could you go back to that for a second?
This is the previous slide, topography, with all the contours.
Yeah, we don't see that right now.
Oh, okay.
The slide I see is soils.
Yes. So these slides are large. So there was
that one. I think, yeah. Great, thank you.
Okay, my apologies. It might be skipping around because it is so large. I apologize. So the next consideration was soils. And there's a number of recommendations in the 2 reports for site development that are to be considered for the detailed design of the subdivision and in infrastructure design. And these things are such as grading, fills, foundations, and retaining walls. And there's a condition in the Schedule A which reflects using these recommendations in the design. The next item to consider is stormwater collection. Do you see the stormwater slide? Is it come up yet?
Just the words. Is there a visual?
No, just the words.
Yeah, we see that.
Okay, great, thank you. So there was a stage master drainage plan, which was prepared by Stantec. This is also in your attachments. So the proposal is that stormwater is collected on sites, and then it's discharged into a collection system. And then the final destination would be a stormwater pond. Then after the stormwater pond, it is released into the Alberta Transportation right-of-way. Through the design review, administration is recommending that the design is required to be modified so that there are no private storm mains, and that the design accommodates stormwater to be collected on the sites and then directed immediately into the public system, rather than the private storm mains collect through individual lots. They traverse through lots before hitting the private or the public system. We also require there to be a clear recommendation for the storm pond design. We did receive a number of recommendations, but there was not one chosen in the design. Through the detailed design, we need to know what the clear recommendation is. And I will discuss this a little bit later too, but one of the requirements we have made for municipal reserve is for a dog park facility. And we have not agreed with the location of the dog park as it is now, but there are potentially better slopes to be used inside the storm pond for the dog park, but it must be shown to be adequate for both a stormwater management pond as well as the dog park.
Ms. Wojtenko, do you mind if we interrupt with questions, because it's going to be a long presentation and going back to slides? Is that okay?
Sure, yes, please.
You can tell me if you'd rather I didn't. I just wondered if you could expand on the third bullet point around private storm mains. Are there places where there are private storm mains? Is that usual or unusual?
Usually private storm mains occur in a bare land condominium subdivision. So utilities, and this is a requirement under the Municipal Government Act, and there are actually an amount of common law that utilities, if they are public, they must be in appropriate facilities. Typically they're in roadways, public utility lots, and in some cases we may take easements. In this case, easements are not appropriate. And so either the applicant could change the design of the subdivision to be a bare land condominium where utilities, which are technically private, would be contained within common property of the condo.
Okay, thank you.
The next consideration is flooding, and there is no valley bottom flood hazard. The geotechnical report did not identify any groundwater concerns. However, steep creeks is a consideration here, and this lot is located at the toe of the Three Sisters Steep Creek Hazard Zone. And so we have a condition of subdivision that the grading takes into consideration any steep creek hazard or risk mitigation. Concern of this area, we did get 2 undermining impact reports and certificates submitted. These are also in the attachments. And so the undermining concerns that we see, there's 2 reports. One is on the site itself. And so mitigations are required for both road and utility installation within the site during the subdivision process servicing. They also recommend that at later stages, certain buildings will require additional mitigation. And so that would come forward at the development permit stage. The second report, which deals with the roundabout, identifies quite a large area of the road which would require paced backfill for this roundabout construction.
Can I just ask a question about the roundabout? Is that something that the province would have a review on as well, the paced backfill for the roundabout, or not?
Yes, so under the Canmore undermining review regulation, the province takes all responsibility for the review of designs and mitigations at subdivision.
Mm-hmm. So they would sign off on this proposed mitigation?
That's correct.
Okay.
Erosion is a concern on this site, and the geotechnical reports did do some slope stability analysis, and it did recommend development setbacks from the steep slopes and mitigation, such as retaining walls. Also required that restrictive covenants are registered on certain titles to maintain development setbacks and to limit further disturbance of the slopes. Administration always is also recommending that a 0.5 hectare portion of lot 18 MR be dedicated ER. This is a very steep slope. The remainder of the slope was designated ER. The slope was identified as unstable and mitigations to be done at the bottom of the slope for those developments, as well as that restrictive covenant. So we do know that from the existing geotechnical reports, we have that slope is unstable. The one thing that the geotechnical reports did not evaluate was in the area of lot 16 MR. And I will get into that a little bit later, but it did not address the stability there or any mitigations for the existing erosion that's occurring on that site. We are also required at subdivision to make sure that any proposed lots have accessibility to a road. And designing access to this site was very challenging for a number of reasons. There's steep slopes, there's Alberta transportation restrictions, as well as emergency access to the site. And so through conversations with the applicant, two unique solutions proposed. The first one is a 5-leg turbo roundabout. And the second solution is the principal commercial street design to function as 2 public accesses. And this would be for emergency purposes. So the roundabout design you can see has 5 legs. One of those legs provides access to the site, to that principal commercial street. The restriction of Alberta transportation was that there was no access to the site off of Three Sisters Boulevard. So the only access into the site was here, and we needed 2 accesses. So this is the secondary access, which is a smaller, less prominent access than here. And you can see this is the leg of the roundabout, which I'll speak to a bit later, encroaches onto the municipal reserve lands. And this is also the part of the leg that requires substantial undermining mitigation.
Can you, so the emergency access on the north of the map would be closed unless there was an emergency? Is there like a barrier or something there?
Yes, it would be designed in accordance with the emergency access requirements in the engineer design construction guidelines, and there would be a bowl or some sort of gate here. Great, Alberta Transportation has communicated in their response to us that it would be restricted to emergency access only.
Thank you.
So the roundabout design and approval is a bit more complex than typical roads because we also require approval by Alberta Transportation. And so through that approval process, the applicant will need to work with the town in providing an updated TIA, which also meets Alberta Transportation requirements, and what's called VISSM modeling. I'm not an engineer, but it is some sort of traffic engineer modeling. For detailed design. And so this does require the use of previously dedicated MR lands for that portion of road. That site, which is municipal reserve, had been identified for a future file huddle by the town. The undermining reports that we now have indicate it is not suitable. And administration is recommending that the municipal reserve not be closed by bylaw, and the road construction is allowed pursuant to the Municipal Government Act. We can allow a road to go through MR without closing the MR, and that is the action that we are proposing to take. And administration is now pursuing other options for the fire hall location. So the second unique solution is the design of the principal commercial street. Can you see the cross section of this commercial street come up now? Okay, great, thanks. Yeah. And so the unique design is that there's actually 4 lanes of travel, although it looks like there are only 2. These are the 2 lanes of travel that you would use on a normal day-to-day basis. However, there is a bike path at the side of each drive lane, and this would function as emergency access should it be required. So in essence, by having this road cross-section design, excuse me, we don't need 2 separate public roads throughout the development. And this is quite unique, this design.
Could you, would you be able to compare, just for my benefit, compare the width of the driving lanes, those shown in the middle, to existing roadway, just so I can visualize the functionality? Would that be as wide as or wider than, for instance, Spring Creek Drive?
Claire, do you mind if I pass on the width of cross sections question to you, please?
Yes. Not at all. Sorry, just unmuting here. So these would be comparable to what's been built at the new intersection. What's shown in the center there is a flush median, but would be space available for vehicle travel, just providing a little bit of visual narrowing there, and wider than Spring Creek, I believe.
Okay, thanks very much, Ms. Zeller.
So as I discussed, this isn't standard EDCG design, but it does meet the emergency access standards, and it does provide pedestrian and active transportation facilities at the same time. So there's a number of additional considerations that need to be addressed when we go forward with detailed design. And that would be, for example, the location and design of transit facilities, snow storage considerations at intersections, as well as driveway access to lot 13. As currently shown in the engineering drawings, lot 13 does not show a driveway access, and we would need to make sure that one is feasible in this location.
Lot 13 is the future residential right at the south end.
Lot 13 is the, let's see if I can get back. Do you see the tentative plan of subdivision right now?
No, not right now.
Okay, it should catch up with me in a second here.
Yeah, I see topography.
It gets stuck on that photo. It's a large one.
Okay, there we are in tentative plan. Yep.
This is lot 13 here.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know when you're back to the screen on water system.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Great. So the water system that was designed will be required to meet EDCG standards. Similar to the stormwater design, some of the water system was also designed for private, to have public mains on private lands. So there is a requirement for the system to be redesigned for a portion of it, that this loop is designed so that you have individual water service lines connecting to the main. The other consideration with the water system is there is a greater water looping with the larger system, and we would like to further explore this at detailed design to minimize disturbance to the steep slopes. The current location of the water line is in that proposed municipal reserve lot. We would like the applicant to also explore putting the water line in under the pathway, the redesigned pathway that we are proposing or recommending. Similar to the water system, the sanitary system also must meet our standards. Again, there have been some portions of the system which have proposed to be public, but they are on private lands, and we would need that to be redesigned. Mostly that is related to the location of the lift station. And so we have a condition of approval that we would like to further explore in the detailed design, the location of the lift station, as well as we'll need the design to meet town and EPCOR standards. That's the technical considerations. There's a bunch of other considerations that the subdivision authority needs to look at when approving a subdivision. And that's consistency with our statutory plans. And so generally the subdivision is consistent with the plans. With the land use bylaw, however, it generally conforms, but administration recommends that there's minor amendments required to the land use bylaw. And this includes the land use district mapping. So for example, if some of the lot realignments or changes in municipal reserve and environmental reserve requires changes in zoning. As well, the new commercial street, this design is different than what was anticipated when this land use district was created. They're currently, it is a 0 yard setback for the front yards. And we are recommending that we need a minimum of 0.5 meters to 1 meters. And that would be in the TSGD district. The next consideration is municipal reserve contribution. And the MGA allows for a municipality to require 10% of, and that's developable land for a municipal reserve. So developable land includes the total area of land minus any ER dedication. We can't take municipal reserve on environmental reserve. And there's quite a large area of land proposed to be environmental reserve. And so we've evaluated the municipal reserve proposal by the applicant in accordance to our various policies, including the MDP, our open spaces development guidelines, and the open spaces and trails plan. And we are not in agreement with the lands that are proposed by the applicant for municipal reserve. Reason for this is that most of the lands proposed are very steep. And so they have greater than 33% grade, almost all of the municipal reserve. And so our administrative recommendation is to only accept different MR lands than has been proposed by the applicant. And I will run through the 3 lots that are being proposed. The first one is lot 14 MR. This is surrounding the stormwater management pond. And it's 0.783 hectares. And it also includes a dog park here. And I'll show that on the next image. We propose that we should only accept lands that are less than 5-to-1 slope as MR. So this would be about a 20% slope. A 33% slope is too great for a dog park. So this is an overlay that staff created to show this is the keeping plan and the grading plan that have been overlaid on top of each other. So for example, this dog park here, these slopes are 33 to 35%.
Oh, sorry, that just popped up now.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. This is the dog park here.
Can you move your cursor again? Okay, yeah.
Thank you. This dog park, these lands are 33 to, I think, over 35% slope, which is too steep for a dog park. As you can see, the remainder of the lands as well proposed for MR are also at a minimum of 33%. So we have proposed a stormwater management pond. These inside slopes are less, they are 5-to-1. If the dog park could be accommodated within these steep, less steep slopes, if that works for the engineering design, as well as accommodating a dog park use, we would potentially give some credit for municipal reserve in the PUL lands.
And if it went that way, it's hard to visualize, you know, in the real world, what that dog park would look like if it was where your cursor is now. I mean, is it wide? Does it compare to one of the neighborhood off-leash dog parks, for instance, that we built, or?
It would meet our requirements. So we have asked the applicant to provide a 0.4 hectare dog park, which is our smallest size of a dog park that we have. And so it would be comparable in size. If the dog park fence, for example, were behind the trail. Because this area, the dog park wouldn't be designed as a regional dog park, we wouldn't be anticipating, there's no parking here. We wouldn't anticipate people to be driving from other communities. This would be people walking from either the residential area or the commercial area to walk their dogs. So it would be a smaller one.
Yeah, thank you.
The second MR proposed is lot 16, and this is the linear trail. So this trail is already existing. It was constructed, I think, with Stewart Creek Phase 3, and they proposed 0.406 hectares in this. However, administration notes that these lands are steeply sloping above and below the trail. The slopes below the trail are eroding and are potentially unstable. These slopes were not assessed in the geotechnical reports that were provided. And so our conditions of approval is for a recommendation for evaluation by a geotechnical engineer. And so any mitigations to stabilize the slope must be undertaken, as well as potential realignment of that municipal reserve or environmental reserve boundary to accommodate any of those unstable slopes. The last MR proposed was lot 18 MR. And as I mentioned earlier, this contains some of those steep unstable lands. And so administration is recommending that this area, which is 0.5 hectare, be included in the ER dedication. So you'll notice that this land here is ER, as well as this ER. So this is that same steep slope. Actually, a lot of the land in here is almost steeper than the other environmental reserve lands. And so administration recommends that the remaining 0.32 hectares of land may be accepted for appropriate park uses. They did include a residential playground in this area. Administration recommendation throughout the approval process, or the review process, to meet our policy set for playgrounds, is that a playground isn't located in the commercial area, that it's actually located in the residential lot. And so we have come up with a list of required MR to be designated as part of this application approval. Would be that in lot 6, that's the that there's a deferred reserve caveat registered on the title, and that would accommodate a future sub-neighborhood playground. And that would be 0.2 hectares. And this is in accordance with town policy. We would accept lot 14 MR for the pond trail, because it is flat and it is a trail, and any other areas which are usable for MR purposes, including any slopes less than 5:1. So approximately by calculation, that's about 0.196 hectares. If the dog park could be included in this area, the engineering works out, it might go up to 0.32 hectares. In lot 16 MR, we would only accept the lands as municipal reserve, which are stable and not steeply sloped. That's been estimated at 0.203 hectares of land. And lot 18 MR, that passive park area, we would accept areas usable for MR purposes. So it could be up to 0.32 hectares. Any outstanding MR then could be used for other pathway connections and passive parks. Pathways and trails is also a consideration at subdivision. This is a very busy map, so I will try to go through all of it. The red is proposed to be constructed. The green is already existing. And then these ones down here are all options, and I'll go through each one of those. So around the roundabout, we would look for pathways and crosswalks around this. Of course, that's subject to Alberta Transportation and our design and approval process with them. There's an existing pathway on the north side, which would be decommissioned, the realignment of the roadway. A new connection would come out here to Durgis, which is great. There's also a bus stop here, and also a connection up Three Sisters Boulevard. So these two neighborhoods would have good connection down to the commercial area. And then within the subdivision, the principal commercial street has both pedestrian and cycling paths along the entire. And this is the stormwater management pond. This has been shown as an asphalt pathway, but we, administration, feel that this could be constructed just as a gravel trail. It doesn't need to be asphalted. These options were provided to administration to review for construction of pathways. Initially, the applicant has proposed what's this steep trail, but we have concerns with the design of the trail, slopes, a number of considerations. And so what we have proposed to the applicant and what we're recommending to the subdivision authority for approval is instead to have this dark blue trail as the asphalt pathway heading down into the subdivision, as well as including this turquoise to bring people to the dog park and stormwater pond area. Construct the yellow or the orange pathways. I'm getting close to the end here. Oh, do you have a question?
Oh, you think so, huh?
Road names. So our civic address policy requires the applicant to propose names at subdivision approval. So they have initially proposed Three Sisters Gate for the principal commercial street. There was no name provided for that connecting link, the secondary access. We, administration, do not feel that this name meets the civic addressing protocol. Gate is typically refers to a short connection, and there's also a number of other Three Sisters named roads in the area. So we provided the applicant some recommendations for other names, as well as a suggestion that we could postpone naming of the road names through condition of approval that they come back with other options. The applicant chose for their final submission to have Columbola Drive and Astor Link. So we would like to ask the subdivision authority that they could approve these road names, or they could instead draft an additional condition of approval that requires the applicant and town administration to further explore road names that might have historical, for example, approach the Canmore Museum or the Stoney First Nations for some road name options.
You know, until I read this report, I had never heard of Columbola, and I looked it up and I learned it's a mountain close to here. Didn't know that. Yeah,
Columbola is the mountain that when you're actually looking at the entrance to this subdivision area, you can see up Skogan Pass, and there's a beautiful ridge, and that's Columbola.
Huh. There you go. It also refers to a some kind of a little bug as well. There's a bug that's called Columbola, just so you know, a little insect.
I haven't seen one of those yet. I'll look up for it. Yeah. And as required by the Act and the regulations, this subdivision application was referred to required agencies, and those responses have been provided in the attachments. We also sent out letters to the adjacent neighbors. No responses were received, so there is no attachments in your package. And we also referred the application internally. And so that went out to all the relevant town departments, and those responses have been included in the attachments for your review. So alternatives to the administration recommendation for approval is that the subdivision authority could also refuse the subdivision, stating its reasons for refusal. You could also approve the subdivision with conditions and reasons other than those listed in the attached Schedule A. So our recommendation is for approval, subject to those conditions, but I'm going to point out there was 2 minor errors. These are just clerical errors in the conditions of approval. Under number 23, it should have said condition number 22. It refers to condition number 21. That's administrative error. Also, please note that condition number 25 accidentally had condition number 26 included in it. So it should be number 25 ends at the town of Canmore, and condition number 26 starts with the detailed engineering drawings. So every condition after that would need to be renumbered. And we apologize for those errors.
Okay. Those 2 changes then, would you look to the subdivision authority to make those changes by amendment, or would we consider this an editorial change?
I think they're editorial, but I think it's good if the subdivision authority does approve those changes. Well, that's you're approving the final conditions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, just remind me when we get to that point if I don't remember.
Great, thank you.
So that was to number 23. And what was the other one that you had on that last slide?
Number 25 needs to be number 25 and number 26.
Okay. Thank you.
And there are a number of reasons for our decision that we have offered to the subdivision authority. So you could also amend the reasons for these decisions should you feel it necessary. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
I have a few. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. So going down, and the other two members of the authority can jump in at any time, of course. Looking at item C, stormwater collection and disposal. The second paragraph, stormwater runoff from each site will be collected and treated in private means prior to discharge to the public storm main. So I'm just curious how the runoff is treated. What's that process?
Brian, may I please ask you to respond to that question?
Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer that question. So first and foremost, I should mention that there is a large oil grit separator proposed immediately upstream of the stormwater management pond. So the primary function of removing sediment and hydrocarbons, the metals from stormwater, will be accomplished by that oil grit separator, which will be owned and maintained by the town.
Sorry, you're a little garbled. What are you calling that?
It's called an oil and grit separator. So it's,
I see.
Essentially, it's a large catch basin, if you will, that uses through moving the stormwater through a weir system and slow moving water. It's able to separate out hydrocarbons and dirt and debris. So it's something that's used widely throughout Canmore and in all municipalities in Canada. So there will be a rather large one just by the stormwater management pond that will be owned and maintained by the town. But in addition to that, each and every site will provide some level of stormwater quality treatment before they discharge to the town system. And that can be accomplished in a couple of ways. Either they could use those OGS systems that I just described, or they could also use low impact development. And so by that, I mean directing stormwater into vegetated strips, which with a thick soil column, and that both filters stormwater and removes hydrocarbons through microbial activity.
Great, thanks very much, Mr. Kinsey. So at the bottom of that page and leading on to page 4, talking about the ability for the town to better consider the use of stormwater pond for a dog park. As a condition of approval, the applicant must submit an analysis of the frequency of ponding exceeding 100 millimeters and an evaluation of potential impacts, et cetera. So that analysis, over what period of time would you expect to see that analysis done?
So what we're looking for here, and I should mention that in the city of Calgary, dry ponds like this are used quite frequently for recreational facilities, such as soccer fields. So it's not entirely uncommon to see this type of use. Now, that being said, in Calgary, those would be much larger dry ponds to accommodate a soccer field. So what we're looking for is, in terms of the frequency analysis, is just a better understanding of how often, like how many times in a given year, should we expect to see more than 6 inches of water accumulate in the storm pond. That'll give us a better understanding of how many days of the year we would expect that the dog park would be unusable.
But is that something that can be done with existing information, or would have to be done over a period of time to literally observe the condition?
It's a relatively simple calculation that the project hydrologist could do based on the modeling that they've already done to date. So it's a condition of approval, and it's something I believe could be provided by the applicant in pretty quick order after if the application is approved.
Okay, great, thank you. And moving on to the section on page 4 of subsidence and undermining. So figure number 6, hazard zones and development in the wood environment and infrastructure report, shows zone 4 as a hazard zone, and that's where building number 1 is intended to go. Is that right?
Sorry, John, can you repeat that?
I'm curious about, so in the wood environment report, it notes that the zone 4 in the report is a hazard zone, and it's shown in magenta. And when I look at the map, it appears that that's where the building number 1 is located. The question is, what's the process for moving forward with that building, given it's in a zone 4 hazard zone?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So there's a number of different levels of reports that are required to be done under the Canmore Undermining Review Regulation. And so at subdivision, we get subdivision level reports. It has identified this area as undermining constraint. The report also states that, so at subdivision, they deal with the mitigations required for roads and utilities. Once the lots are created, any buildings that would need to go there get a different level of report at the development permit stage. And that goes through the same process that these reports went through. They need to do the evaluation, mitigations, and then it needs to be reviewed by a third party as well. So it would be, for buildings, it would be at the development permit stage that it would be addressed.
So it would require an entirely or an additional undermining review process.
That's correct.
Right, thank you. In the same paragraph under undermining, it notes the roundabout area is indicated to have more significant impacts from undermining. And I'm just curious, so the roundabout is, the province has oversight on that, correct? The province has oversight on the roundabout itself? Yes.
Yes, in consult, the town will work with the applicant first, but Alberta Transportation has the final approval.
Okay, and future responsibility, maintenance of the roundabout, is that a provincial responsibility or is that under the municipality?
Andy, if you're here, can you speak to responsibilities for maintenance on the roundabout, please?
I can. Thank you, Tracy. That section of road is currently owned and maintained by Alberta Transportation. And our expectation would be that it continues to be going forward, at least from a vehicular perspective. I think as we work through the application process for the pathways, snow clearing for pathways, for example, we'll likely end up with some responsibility there. Being that it's a different standard than AT would typically build.
Okay, that's what I assume. Thanks very much. And on the subject of the turbo roundabout, you know, is it possible for you to put the diagram of the roundabout back up? Anyone? I know there's several.
I flipped there. It might just take a moment for it to come
Sure.
up.
The one I was looking at was page 259 of the full package, but can you zoom in on that at all? On the roundabout part? Just trying to imagine myself.
I don't think I can zoom in on this presentation.
So this will do. So if I'm driving into town off the Trans-Canada, then I have clear option to turn right going towards town on the Parkway. If I want to go around to the other leg of the Parkway, or so I would come onto the roundabout and would I stay in the outside lane or get into the inside lane and then go back to the outside lane? How did these turbo roundabouts work in that sense? So if you were wanting to go to the Columbola, you'd stay in the middle lane coming off the highway and then come onto the roundabout on the outside lane and then transition to, is there 2 lanes at the north end of that or north side of that?
I can answer that. So if you were coming from the highway and entering onto Columbola Drive, you would be in the inner lane and you would follow that lane all the way around through the roundabout without needing to change lanes. So the design of this is a little bit different from a traditional roundabout, which would have concentric rings, in that it only adds the secondary lanes where they're needed for capacity. And so that reduces some of the need for lane changing and leaving and improve safety by reducing conflict points.
Right. So I've driven on roundabouts kind of like this in Australia, and depending on the amount of traffic, it can be a little, well, nerve-wracking for tourists anyways. But I guess it's something that drivers will adjust to in the same way they adjusted to the first roundabout in Canmore on Bow Valley Trail.
Yeah, and the differences between this sort of design and the sort that has concentric lanes is that they are a little more intuitive and simpler to use, and there would be signage that would go along with the lanes and lane markings there to indicate if you're going through which lane to be in.
Sure, I'll just have to look forward to trying it out. Thanks. On the page 6, there's a reference to the need to do a study to look for an alternative fire hall location. And this is not really directly connected to this discussion today, but I'm curious if anybody knows when that study might be done or might be complete. Ms. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I defer that question to Ms. Smithers.
Yes, so sorry, I'm not going to have my camera on because I'm blind.
That's okay. Yep.
Sunlight coming in through my window right now. We would need to look at an alternate location for that fire hall. We don't have a date yet for that study. It would really depend on the timing of new development in that area, but it is something that we would be turning our minds to. I would say at a conceptual, at a very high level within the next year or two, because we would want to start including that in our offsite levy model.
All right. And is it reasonable to assume that the focus of that study will be in the same area, same region of Canmore?
On the east end of Canmore, yes. Where? I can't really tell without at least initiating that study.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't see Councillor Seeley anymore. Is he there? Oh, there you are. Still
got a
watching.
question as well.
You have a question, Councillor Hillstead?
No, Councillor Seeley has his hand up, but you couldn't see him. So,
Councillor Seeley.
You mentioned Lot 13 was tentative to demonstrate access to this parcel. Was it missed, or is it complicated to get to Lot 13? Can you just go over that for me?
Yes, it was not shown in the application submission, and we do require it. So it was just not provided in the application itself.
It should be an easy fix though, right? Nothing complicated, it was just missing.
I can't answer that. Perhaps some of the engineers can. It depends on safety and roads and the road design there. I'm not sure if we've looked into that or if we're just, at this point, I think the applicant needs to show that that lot does have access. Claire, you might have further comments on that?
I think you summarized it well, in that we would want to see and review what's being proposed to provide access to that site, and would would expect that to happen in conjunction with a detailed design, looking at where we'll fit transit, so on.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at the sewage disposal on page 8, third paragraph down more or less, it notes that administration or applicant has proposed public sanitary means on private land within easements. And you did speak to this. Administration has provided direction to the applicant that this is not acceptable for the town. And could you just refresh my understanding of that that direction from admin?
Brian, do you mind going into more detail on the sanitary section?
For sure, I can take that.
Thank you.
So the lift station, sanitary lift station is located at the low point in the development necessarily. So we have gravity mains flowing from all parts of the development down off of the spine road and then towards the sanitary lift station. At that point, the sanitary the wastewater is pumped and then it's put into a force main, which goes back out, basically the same alignment, and then into the spine road. What we would prefer would be to have the sanitary lift station in an alternate location, possibly adjacent to the storm pond, which would allow for direct connection of both the force mains and the gravity mains to the spine road infrastructure without passing through private property. And the reason for this is having fairly lengthy amount of public infrastructure under private roadways. If ever we needed to go in and do some rehabilitation on that sanitary infrastructure, it would be quite disruptive to the businesses there and expensive for the town to do so. So seeing a viable alternative is something we wish to explore at the applicant.
Great, that helps me quite a bit. Thanks very much. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Now, you did mention that the TSGD district may require further amendments based on this approval. So when would come? Would that just be after this gets approved and we just have to, is there a certain time frame that we have to amend it, or is it just eventually it needs to be done? How does that work?
Yeah, good question. In particular, we would want it done before any development. If the development permit, we wouldn't expect development permits to be submitted for a while. The infrastructure still needs to be, there's a certain number of things that would need to be done prior to endorsement of the subdivision and sale of lots. Detailed design would need to be done on the roads, the sanitary, and the grading. So there is quite a bit of time to do things like minor amendments to the land use bylaw to make sure that it works for the subdivision.
Thank you.
I had a question in the written report that I think you covered for me, but I'll bring it up in any case. So page 12 of your report, you're talking about trails and pedestrian connections, and your recommendation is the pathway that was shown in yellow and the one in orange not be constructed. If I understand what you were saying, it's really because of the steepness of the land. Is that really the primary factor?
There is a number of considerations, but yes, the steepness of the grades. Claire can speak more to our evaluation of the proposed grades, for example, of the yellow pathway. And a bunch of that comes down to operations and maintenance concerns. So Jordy is not here today, but Lisa can maybe speak to the operational concern. Claire?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just unmuting here. Yeah, grading was certainly a significant factor in terms of looking at the yellow alignment and the navy blue alignment. So looking at maintaining grades that our operators are able to snow clear in the winter so that we've got year-round access to the site, and as well trying to keep those grades as low as possible so that it's accessible and usable by people as well. Fewer switchbacks on the blue alignment too, and it ties in well to the kind of central part of the spine road and uses some of the existing alignment that's had trees removed already.
Great, thank you. Councillor Seeley.
I have a question about the pathways and snow clearing. With a 5% grade, there's regular landing areas that are required. Can you just go over that with me?
Sorry, just to clarify in terms of how that will work with snow clearing, or?
Yeah, the landing areas, they're required because of the steepness, but where would they be located?
Okay, so through the detailed design process, we can work with the applicant on specifics depending on where on the trail those are being located. But the idea is to provide areas where a person can rest if they're less mobile at a regular interval. So potentially that could be off the side of the pathway if there's space. There are certain parts of the trail as well, I think, where it switchbacks that it flattens out anyways. So those could be considered resting areas. I think there are a few different ways that it could be approached.
Okay, thanks.
I'm looking at page 14. It notes the subdivision authority could, as a condition of approval, choose different road names or require the applicant to propose names, yada, yada. I'm interested in considering at least an amendment to suggest that the applicant and or the town work with Stoney Nakoda to perhaps suggest name for the main roadway that would be fitting. Perhaps someone on admin listening in could draft that motion for me to bring forward at the end when we get to the conditions.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's noted. We'll hopefully have some language for you by the time we get to the point of decision.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the Schedule A. So looking at the fourth condition in Schedule A, prior to submitting detailed design, the developer shall prepare and have approved transportation impact assessment, et cetera, et cetera. So how is that different from the TIA that is shown in attachment 11?
Tracy, can you respond to that, please? Thank you.
Yes, and sorry, attachment 11 is the site-specific TIA. So this would require some modifications to some of the assumptions around land use that were used as inputs for that TIA, but generally it will cover the same area. It's an update really to the background volumes that are assumed along the Three Sisters Parkway for vehicle trips.
So is it something that just simply or puts finer detail on the TIA that was included as part of the application?
Just brings it into line with the currently approved land uses in the surrounding areas. So it would be the same level of detail as the TIA, but just a change to the inputs in what was submitted.
Okay, thank you. In condition number 10B, notice the number of driveways onto the principal commercial street must be minimized to reduce conflict points. And what's the standard of what's the standard that would be applied to that?
Our EDCG provides some guidance in terms of access design. Columbola Drive is a collector roadway, and we've also identified active transportation facilities along both sides of the road to support high volumes of people walking and cycling. So speaking at a general level, it would be to try and reduce the number of conflict points where you have vehicles entering and exiting and crossing pathways. So at this stage at subdivision, if there are opportunities for some of those to be consolidated between adjacent sites or not to provide multiple accesses where they're not required, that would be the intent of that requirement.
Just as it sounded. Thank you. And in 10D, it references a swept path analysis shall be provided. What's a swept path analysis?
That would be to look at the design specifics of the roadway. So most of the vehicles that travel along the roadway are going to be passenger vehicles that don't require as much space to make turns. And the control vehicle for those roadways and accesses would be larger delivery vehicles coming in there. So swept path analysis just shows the space that's required for those particular vehicles to make a turn and reflect that they can be accommodated through the proposed geometry.
Okay, not what I thought at all. Thanks. There's a number of acronyms within the conditions, many of which are spelled out at one point or another. I was looking at number 14 and PUL. What's that acronym for? PUL.
A PUL is a public utility lot. It typically contains utilities, underground utilities in it.
Great, thank you. And in condition number 19, it suggests that there'd be required an assessment of potential impacts to downstream water quality should the pond area be proposed for use as a dog park. I think that's pretty straightforward, but is it a concern about uncollected dog feces contaminating water, or is that what that's about?
Yes, indeed, it is. Wish to assess the potential impact. Certainly we would have the Mutt-Mitt dog bag dispensers located strategically around the site, and we would ask dog owners to collect dog feces. However, it is to be expected there would be a small amount that would enter the effluent. So the assessment would just be an assurance that downstream water quality can be ensured with that dog park function.
Okay, and is that something we've done with all of the dog parks that we've approved?
To my knowledge, no. This is very specific. If we were to propose a dog park in within the stormwater management facility.
So it is just the location that's requiring this additional study.
Correct.
Great, thank you. And then number 20, it talks about the emergency access point. I assume it would be, is it similar in nature to the emergency access road in Rundleview and Silvertip? Would it be designed to that kind of standard?
Brian or Claire, could you please? Thanks, Brian.
Sure, I can take that. Yeah, it would be, so we're talking about the emergency access that connects out to the Three Sisters Boulevard, I believe, near the interchange.
Right, it was sort of, yeah, I don't have the map, but yeah, up to the north end of the subdivision.
Yeah, so the town of Canmore, for emergency access, we defer to the City of Calgary Fire Department access standards. So that would require a 6-meter wide paved surface capable of supporting 80,000 pounds. It would be locked off with a swing gate, and there would also be, in this particular case, we don't have a visual in front of us, but there is a central median that separates the inbound and outbound lanes, and there would very likely be a gate and some changes made to that median as well to allow all turns, egress and access in case of an emergency.
Great, thanks very much. So I'm curious, under condition 26, it notes that prior to the endorsement of the plan of survey, developer shall have constructed or paid to have constructed all on-site and off-site municipal services, etc. And I have a couple of questions, one of which is related to the endorsement process itself. And I recall we had a discussion not that long ago in regards to Silvertip subdivision, but if Ms. Wojtanko could speak a bit more to the intent of 26 and the impact on endorsement, and also curious about what a realistic timeline might be for all of that work to be done.
Yeah, thank you. So when you endorse a plan of survey, the titles to the lots are created. And then they can be sold. And so it would be the town's responsibility to ensure that those utilities and roads are provided to those lots if the developer defaults on that. So we would need to either have the money in place or to have them constructed. Our town preference, and we have been discussing this with the applicant, is that the utilities are constructed and the road access prior to endorsement. And then the remainder of and this would be negotiated at the signing of the development agreement. And then the remainder of the works for municipal infrastructure would be secured through performance securities at the time of subdivision, at signing of the development agreement. So timing of endorsement really depends on the speed of the applicant in doing the detailed design and commencing construction.
So maybe I'm misremembering, but wasn't there a time limit on getting to the endorsement?
There is a time limit under the MGA. So for any subdivision approval, you have 1 year to take an application for. And if it is not endorsed by that time, council can give an extension to that approval. And that's not to say that endorsement needs to happen within 1 year. That is a typical expiration period for anything within subdivisions, just to ensure that a subdivision approval doesn't go on in perpetuity. Design standards change of municipalities, zoning changes, and so that gives the municipality to not renew a subdivision approval if it's no longer relevant. So it needs to be renewed at kind of annual stages.
Okay, so there is that ability for an endorsement to be extended or the process to be extended to get the endorsement.
That's correct.
Thanks. And on condition number 27, grading of the subdivision area. So I'm curious what degree of grading we might see in this subdivision, and thinking back to the grading that occurred with Stewart Creek Phase 3, is there, can you just speak to that, the level of grading that you might anticipate?
Ryan, do you mind answering that question for me, please?
Okay. Drawings submitted by the applicant, preliminary engineering drawings, is a what they call a grading cut fill heat map. So you'll notice there are some, I'm just trying to pull it up now, but there are some significant cuts and fills in the order of 3 meters.
Your sound is kind of breaking up a little bit, at least for me.
Apologize for that. My computer's working pretty hard here today. There are some areas of relatively significant cut in the orders of in both directions. It is worth noting, and as Tracy had mentioned earlier, the town has granted a development permit for management of the existing stockpiles. You may be familiar that there are 2 rather large stockpiles there, and work is ongoing right now in terms of manipulating those so that they can be considered as structural fill. But once that work is done, there will be some other areas of fill and cut as well. In particular, to make the stormwater management facility, there are the downstream side of it closest to the highway is essentially a berm, so like a 3 meter high berm that they need to construct. And then on the opposite side, they do need to do some cuts into the slope there to form that stormwater basin, if you will.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just call a brief recess now. So we'll take a 10-minute break and return to the public session then.
So have a recess starting at 2:23, and then we return at 2:33.
That sounds good. Yep.
Okay, sounds good.
Just let me know when we're off live.
Did you want to go in camera for to have a discussion? Because we're unable to pause the YouTube.
Okay, well, in that case, yes, rather than taking a break, I'll move that we go in camera to discuss an issue. Those in favor? Okay, so we'll go in camera then. Thank you. Okay, I believe everybody's back in the meeting. So I just apologize for that. There was some discrepancy with the lot numbers that were reflected on the map that's been used for the presentation, and administration is working now to correct that map to reflect the correct lot numbers. So while admin is doing that in the background, we'll continue with the agenda. I may have to move to amend the agenda again to add a new 0.5. So I'll move that we amend the agenda to 0.5 being identification of discrepancies. And then 0.6 would be the decision. Those in favor? Okay, so firstly, are there any other questions from members of the authority, subdivision authority, in regards to the report and or the conditions? Seeing none, thank you for that, one and all. Now there is an opportunity for the applicant to address the subdivision authority on the matter of 3 amendments that the applicant has just recently put forward. So if Mr. Ollenberger, I assume, is prepared to speak just to those 3 requests, then we will hear from Mr. Ollenberger now.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I appreciate that opportunity. I'm just preparing a couple things now. And I wonder if I could perhaps add some information, with your indulgence, of course, on things like undermining questions that came up where you could ask questions, because I think we have a couple maps that might help you out in your understanding of the application, if that's helpful.
Speaking for myself, I don't have questions specifically about the undermining other than what we discussed earlier. I mean, it is fairly straightforward. Well, we talked a lot about undermining in this year. Do the other members of the authority have any interest in having a broad discussion on undermining issues? I think we're okay there, Mr. Ollenberger.
Okay, sounds fair. Well, I'm going to reference our current submission for the subdivision plan when I talk about some of the lot numbers. And I also will recognize the administration's minor amendment about condition 26 actually being renumbered to become condition 27. So for clarity, I think I can help out there too. Let me there we go. Just to make sure that we all have the right conditions on our headspace, so I could share my screen and show them if that's fair.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So this condition 26, a little bit earlier inside your meeting, was recommended by the administration to be renumbered to number 27. So it says, prior to the endorsement of the plan of survey, shall construction paid for all the on-site municipal services and infrastructure and things like that. While we heard the administration's presentation, we do have several local interests and a couple of others that are interested in doing development permit applications at a point in which they can start to submit, start to move those things forward, such that pretty much they're doing their work concurrently with construction out in the field. This particular condition would cause it such that we build the whole thing and then there'd be another giant pause, so to speak, while we got a plan endorsed and okay, now we'll get development permits. That's one of the things we're quite worried about on this one. But we think that there's some good arguments and responsibility, of course, for the municipality to ensure that there's water and there's road access and sewer access and things like that before considering development permit operation. So what we did was we tried to clarify within the middle column of number 26 here, prior to the endorsement plan, a survey will have constructed the main spine road, secondary access road, and roundabout needed to service the subdivision. And really what that's referencing is making sure that, say, the pathway that's coming down from the side of the hill on the parkway, which needs a lot more work. You know, we're being asked to absorb 5 meters of grade 100 meters faster than the parkway itself does, which is at 8%. That way, some of those things can have time to be done well and work themselves out, but not hold up the entire project. So we focused on critical, what's needed, what's effective, what's serviceable, but that's our objective on number 27.
26.
Well, depends if you accept the administrative amendment, I think. Because if you'll recall, Ms. Wentenko noted that she had to insert another new 26 because 25 included 2 clauses by accident.
Right, Troy.
I believe usually political people are right, but this time I guess I got one. So that would be my recommendation for new number 27, old 26. On number 23, we're doing and the administration has already caught the 21 should be 22, which is great. And we're suggesting that the word should be used here as opposed to shall, because there is a challenge on that road alignment for sure. We've definitely seen some, we suspect we're going to need 3 to 4 meters of grade change along the side of that hill to accommodate some of the pathway connections that are being described in there, if not more. And I think making the should in there will just give the administrative engineering team and planning team a little bit more flexibility that if there's some minor adjustments they can make to the conditions to make the overall outcomes better, then that would be a positive thing for the project and the town. On your new number 32, previously 31, regarding the boundary of lot 18 MR. And you'll see soon that number might just need a minor adjustment as well there. We actually did not find any unsuitable geotechnical conditions within there. So I was a little surprised at that one, to be honest. We, in fact, right in the report itself on page 16, and I don't know what page it is in your materials, it says right here along the south property line, minimum factor of safety of 1.5 against slope stability is obtained within the portion of slope that is steeper than 15%. Most of this area resides within the current MR boundary. And so we've suggested, and I'll go back to those conditions, sorry, that we just clarify that maybe if demonstrated by a qualified geotechnical engineer, that if there is an instability issue, we can certainly address it. We don't believe there is. Currently, neither does our geotechnical engineer, but then this way the town is still protected and we can make sure that we don't inadvertently sterilize land for an issue that may not actually exist. And I think that's it for the 3 conditions you asked me about, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions of clarification from the other 2 members of the subdivision authority? Seeing none, thanks for bringing these forward. I'll now look for admin to provide a response to Any suggestions from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To respond to the slope stability questions or concerns that were raised by Mr. Ollenberger, I'll ask Mr. Kinsey or Mr. Asarte to respond to those.
Thank you.
Ms. Wojtenko may come in after Mr. Kinsey with some additional comments as well.
That's fine, thank you.
Sure. To the chair, I'm hoping you're able to hear me better now. I managed to find a headset. Great.
Yeah, you sound much better, thank you.
Okay. So the primary concern about the steep slope area there is it's similar in nature to the rest of the ER dedicated areas, which have similar gradient to this one. And in fact, the proposed Block 18 MR is in some places steeper than some of the other areas that are designated as ER. Those areas are designated as ER because of, primarily because of the steepness and the erosion potential. So if trees are removed, then it could pose an instability issue in the future. Secondly, there's what appears to be an old drainage channel below the parkway. As far as I can tell from previous mapping, it looks like an old drainage channel that was severed with the construction of the parkway. And that's something that wasn't specifically addressed in the geotechnical studies.
Okay, is there further information on that?
Ms. Wojtenko, did you have anything additional you'd like to add?
Yes, so in the geotechnical report, they primarily just addressed the bottom, the toe of the slope. And in discussing where the buildings are located, some of the buildings they noted at the post-development were cutting into the toe of the slope. And so they were recommending specific geotechnical recommendations for that to make sure that the slope didn't slump. And so they looked to retaining walls and further information on that. So we do know there are instabilities with that slope. Secondly, they also looked at the stability of that slope for the potential of the pathway going in there. And they did mention that there would be further study done on that pathway, but if that slope was disturbed at all, it needed to be immediately remediated with vegetation to make sure that it didn't slump. So there's other sections in that geotechnical report. The geotechnical report really looked at the development at the base of the toe slope. It didn't actually evaluate all of the slopes very well, but I would support Brian's conclusion that the remainder of the slope was designated ER. This slope has the same instability and the same steepness issues, if not worse than the rest of the ER. So I'm not sure I understand why the applicant would suggest that this would not qualify as ER.
So accordingly, Mr. Chair, we would recommend that the condition as currently proposed by the administration would remain unchanged.
Okay, thank you.
So my apologies, I'm looking at two screens. So with regard to 23 recommended changes from the applicant on that. Again, the administration is happy with the way that the recommendation is currently worded with the shall. We would note that under condition number 1, the town has a level of latitude to work with the applicant to come up with solutions that best fit the context of the site. So we don't feel that it's necessary to make that change in number 23. And the same for number 31. Whether it's may or shall, we still can fall back to number one condition, where all of the conditions are required to be met to the satisfaction of the town. So we do have that latitude to go into further negotiations as we get into detailed design, as obviously by the name detailed design, there could be other elements that we maybe were not aware of at this point in the process that we can flesh out further in that process of detailed design.
So in regards to condition number 1, wouldn't that condition, wouldn't that direction supersede any of the other direction in the following conditions? Regardless, I mean, all conditions are to be carried out to the sole satisfaction in the sole and absolute discretion of the town.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So the following conditions are more specific. It does give the applicant a greater understanding and clarity about what the town's expectation will be as we move into the next phase, but also noting that as we move into the next phase and additional information is provided, we may need to look at different approaches than maybe what was contemplated at the time of subdivision approval. And therefore, administration has the latitude to kind of ebb and flow as we work through those details.
Thank you. Are there questions from other members of the subdivision authority for admin at this time? Seeing none, I will go back to the agenda. And we added point number 5, discrepancies with the lot numbers and admin. Ms. Wojtanko, are you prepared now to speak to that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll ask the clerk to bring up the track changed version of the condition so that all in attendance can see what was proposed versus what's being amended, and we can ensure that all of the numbering is correct. So I'll just give Ms. Bravo-Stewart a moment to share her screen.
And just to clarify as well through the chair, did you want to see, because the reason that the numbers are changing in the conditions of approval is because the subdivision plan that was provided in the package to the to the subdivision authority is slightly different than the plan that the applicant had submitted a little later in the process, and the wrong plan was provided to the authority. So just to clarify to the applicant and through this meeting of which the appropriate tentative plan of subdivision that would be being approved, because it's different than what's in your package.
I'm having a hard time understanding it, what you're saying. So the plan that was in our package, the entire report, which plan are you referring to?
Yep, so the plan that's in the package shows 13 lots. The applicant had actually resubmitted a plan that did not make it into the package with only 11 lots. So they are not applying for 12 commercial lots, they're applying for less. And so I could show the new plan that's being approved, because that's what was actually submitted, rather than the plan that's in the package, just for clarification so everybody understands what is actually being approved.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, it may be helpful if we, Ms. Bravo-Stewart, can you scroll down to the list of attachments?
The attachments are in the staff report, not in the Schedule A.
So I would just ask for your indulgence. If we refer back to the report, what I would recommend is that the subdivision authority make a motion to amend attachment 2 and reference the updated proposed plan of subdivision that Ms. Wojtenko, you can correct me, was dated April
22nd, 2021.
So that would clarify for the record, as well as anyone who's watching, that the one that was originally provided in the package was incorrect. A new one is being attached, and the conditions associated with the amended proposed plan of subdivision is what Ms. Bravo Stewart has on the screen. Those numbers will correspond with the amended attachment 2. Does that help?
Yes, if you would have that motion prepared and ready to go.
Sure.
On the overhead at that time or on the share screen.
That we can do. I will maybe defer to Ms. Wojtenko to walk through the changes in the Schedule A, just so that everyone's clear. Does that work for you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, thank you. So just looking back at the 3 requests from the applicant, could you address the suggested change for what section 26, which is now section 27, I believe?
Katie, you have control of the Schedule A, so you'll need to scroll down for me, please. Katie, this one I don't believe is the version, maybe I should show it. This doesn't show the track changes of the changes that I had just made.
Is track changes turned on your version, Ms. Bravo Stewart?
It was, but I can stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Kate, Ms. Wojtenko, if you have those handy, if you can share your screen.
Great. Can everybody see this?
We
yes.
can.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So why don't I'll run through them from top to bottom of the changes. So in 10C, lot 13 should reference lot 11. In number 23, that had changed to condition number 22. And then number 26 is the new number, and then everything is renumbered after that. So continue on administration, just the technical or the editorial changes. In number 32, lot 18 MR should be lot 16 MR. And there's a whole bunch here in number 33 and 34. And in 39, there's also, should say, lots 1 through 11.
Ms. Wojtenko, could I ask you to show the revised, what we will be making the amended attachment 2, which is the updated plan of subdivision, just so that for those watching, as well as for the subdivision authority to see the changes? Thank you.
Can everybody see this plan? There's some green and some yellow lines.
We see green and red.
Thank you. The
No problem.
The other yellow, which looks red sometimes. This is an overlay that I've created of the old plan versus the new one. The new plan shows everything in red. So in this new plan, these lot lines are no longer there. So that is different. So this is now one big lot, which is lot 9, which then caused renumbering of all the other lots above lot 9. So there were no other substantive changes to the plan. It's purely elimination of these 2 lot lines to create one bigger lot.
Ms. Wojtenko, was there a numbering change to the ER or MR lots?
Yes, it's hard to see. I'll pull up the plan not in green and yellow. So this one is lot 17 ER, this is lot 16 ER, and this is lot 15 ER, which is different from before.
I think you were meaning lot 17 MR, you said ER, or lot 16 MR and lot 17 ER.
Yes.
Correct, okay. Is that helpful, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, yes, I'm wondering if the change to the lot numbers has any substantive impact on majority or the brunt of the conditions. Or I guess I'm asking, what might the impact be from this change of plan to the conditions, to the wording of the conditions?
Yes, every change to the conditions is shown in track changes now.
So what you have on the overhead are the changed conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, can you, I'd like to have that in front of me on my desk to review before the decision is made, just so I'm fully understanding. Is that something that can be, are you in the building?
I can email these.
We can coordinate that. I think Ms. Smithers is in the building. So we can coordinate that amongst administration to get that printed and to.
Yes, I am. I wonder if this might be a good time for a break. And then Ms. Wojtenko, if you can email that to me, or just put it in Teams and then I'll print it off and bring it down to Chair.
Yeah, I'm certainly feeling like a break is required at this point. We need to catch up with some of these changes. Councillor Hillstead.
Just if Ms. Wojtenko could go back to the slide she was just showing, there's just one spot there where some of the changes were from lot 16 to 14, but then there was one that said lot 16 to 15. So I just wanted to double check that that was actually correct.
So again, if I can suggest that at the break, I will bring the wording down and then we can make sure that the other 2 members of the authority have it as well. And then that will give administration time to just double check and confirm that we've caught all the necessary edits.
Sounds good.
Okay, with that, then I will call a 15-minute break.
So I have that we'll be starting a break at 3:12. So we can be back at
Make it 3:30.
Yeah, we can make it 3:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll call the meeting back to order. And I believe at this point I will move that we go in camera again. Those in favor? Okay, we'll move in camera. Is everybody back? Appears to be. So at this time, I'll move that the subdivision authority recess the meeting to 3 p.m. Tomorrow, October the 5th. Those in favor? And no opposed. So we're now taking a recess until tomorrow afternoon. And see you then.
Mr. Chair, do we need to note the time of we're meeting tomorrow?
3 p.m. I said.
Okay, sorry.
Thought I said that.
I just wanted to be clear. Sorry.
3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We'll see you.